Long ago, something happened to humanity, something they feared more than anything, and everything started to go wrong. But what you're about to see here is something you've never seen before, and you've been taught it wrong. Now it's time to turn the page. The history we learn in schools was written by the winners. It is a chronicle of wars, kings, and borders. But what if the true history of humanity is written elsewhere? What if it is hidden in texts that the winners tried to burn? In 1946, in the hills of Qumran on the West Bank, a group of Bedouin teenagers accidentally broke a clay jar hidden in the darkness of a cave. They weren't looking for treasure, they were looking for a lost goat. But what they found was worth more than gold. The Dead Sea Scrolls. Among hundreds of fragments, one text stood out. A text that was not just a religious record, it was a report. An eyewitness account from a time before the Great Flood. A book that details the moment when the human species was no longer alone on this planet. This is not a story about faith. This is a story about genetic intervention, forbidden technology, and a bloodline that forever changed our DNA. Welcome to the truth they tried to hide. Welcome to the Book of Enoch. Who was Enoch? In the Bible, in the book of Genesis, he is mentioned in only 5 sentences. It is said that he walked with God and then was not, for God took him. But the Ethiopian keepers of ancient scriptures have a different version. For them, Enoch did not just disappear, he was taken away. He was the first human allowed to see the architecture of the universe. The book he left behind is divided into 5 parts, but the most shocking is the Book of the Watchers. It does not speak in metaphors, it gives coordinates. Mount Hermon, the place where the borders of Syria and Lebanon meet today. The text says that 200 beings descended there. Bene Elohim, the sons of God. But Enoch calls them by their true name, the Watchers. They did not come as conquerors with weapons. They came as teachers, and they came with lust. The text is brutal in its honesty. These angels were not disembodied spirits. They were biologically compatible with humans. They saw human women and took them for themselves. But this wasn't just an affair, it was a pact. Enoch lists the names of their leaders: Samyaza, their general, Azazel, the bringer of forbidden knowledge. They swore an oath in blood on the summit of Hermon to break cosmic law and mix their seed with mortals. What followed was not a blessing, it was contamination. Historians tell us about the Neolithic Revolution, a moment approximately 10,000 years ago when humanity, for some inexplicable reason, suddenly stopped hunting and started building cities, farming, and forging metal. Science has no answer as to why this happened so suddenly. The Book of Enoch does. The Watchers didn't just seduce women, they traded sex for knowledge. Azazel, according to the text, taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates. He taught them metallurgy. Before Azazel, war was a fight with sticks. After Azazel, war became an industry of death. But the teaching didn't stop at weapons. Other Watchers taught astronomy, the motion of the moon, medicinal herbs, and sorcery. They taught women the beautifying of the eyelids and the wearing of precious stones. Sounds harmless? Think again. It was psychological manipulation, the art of seduction and ego. They gave us nuclear energy while we were still in the cradle. They gave us the tools of the gods, and we used them like savages. Enoch writes that the earth was filled with blood and unrighteousness. This was not a gift. This was an experiment that went out of control. The result of this unnatural union between the Watchers and human women were children, but not human children. The Bible calls them men of old, men of renown. Enoch calls them the Nephilim, translated from Hebrew, the fallen ones, or those who cause others to fall. They were hybrids, genetic anomalies, giants of immense strength and insatiable appetite. The texts say that initially, they devoured the labor of men. When the food ran out, they began to devour men. And then they crossed a line that should never have been crossed. They began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish. What does that mean? Ancient texts suggest genetic manipulation, the creation of chimeras, monsters. Are the myths of centaurs, minotaurs, and griffins actually memories of these biological experiments? Marco Polo wrote of giants in Zanzibar. The Irish have myths of giants who built causeways across the sea. The Native Americans of North America tell of red-haired cannibal giants. Are these just fairy tales, or the collective trauma of humanity? A memory of a time when we were not at the top of the food chain? The architecture of that era defies logic. Stone blocks of 1,000 tons in Baalbek, the perfect geometry of the pyramids. Did humans build this with copper chisels, or are these the remnants of a civilization built, or at least overseen, by the sons of the Watchers? This leads us to the most famous event in human history, the flood. We were taught that God sent the flood because people were wicked, that they lied and stole. But the Book of Enoch reveals the true, terrifying context. The flood was not a moral punishment. It was a sterilization process. The human genome was corrupted. The bloodline was polluted with the DNA of the Watchers. Had it lasted a few more generations, Homo sapiens would have ceased to exist. We would have been replaced by a hybrid race. Noah wasn't chosen just because he was a good man. The book of Genesis says he was perfect in his generations. This doesn't mean he didn't sin. It means his genetics were intact. He was pure human. The flood was a hard reset, the only way to destroy the bodies of the Nephilim and save the human species from extinction. But what about their spirits? Enoch gives us an answer that explains every story of possession and the paranormal. When a human dies, their soul goes to judgment. But the Nephilim were demigods. Their bodies died in the water, but their spirits are immortal. They remained here. Enoch writes, "Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies. They shall afflict, oppress, and destroy on the earth." What we call demons today, these are not fallen angels. They are the disembodied spirits of dead giants, trapped on earth, hungry for the life that was taken from them. Is the Book of Enoch an original story? Or is it just a copy of something older? Thousands of years before the Bible was written, the Sumerians in modern-day Iraq wrote down an almost identical story. Only the names are different. Instead of Watchers, they called them the Anunnaki, those who from heaven came down to earth. The Sumerians claimed the Anunnaki came looking for gold, that they created humans as a labor force, that they mingled with us, and that they brought the flood because the noise of humans became unbearable. Enoch, Gilgamesh, Atrahasis, the Book of Genesis. These are not different stories. It is the same story told from different perspectives. One says they were demons, another says they were gods, the third says they were ancient astronauts. But they all agree on one thing: we are not alone. and our evolution was not accidental. Why did the church ban the Book of Enoch in the 4th century? Why did they want to erase it? Maybe because the truth was too dangerous for the masses. Because it destroys the boundary between religion and science fiction. Because it tells us that our gods were not metaphors, but beings of flesh and blood, or something else. Jesus said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." Look around you. Genetic engineering, hybrids, artificial intelligence, the merging of man and machine. We are playing the watchers again. We are eating from the tree of knowledge again, and we haven't learned the lesson from the past. The scrolls were found in 1947, the same year Roswell happened, the same year the CIA was founded, the same year the world entered the new atomic age. Coincidence? Or is history repeating itself? Enoch left us a warning. The only question is anyone listening?